Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series. The Catalyst webinar series is a bi-weekly educational platform for creating success and change in your club and career. We're very excited to be showcasing the SCPGA Centennial. This is for, most everybody knows at this point, but we are halfway through our Centennial celebration year. The Southern California PGA was incepted in 1924, and here we are in 2024 celebrating 100 years. There is a marvelous book that Bryce Seaver is putting together, similar to the amazing literature he's put together for the CTCS over the last couple of years. The book just keeps getting better and better. And so there is a Centennial book that is nearing completion. And this morning on the Catalyst, we're going to talk a little bit about that book. We're going to go over the outline, the contents, and talk a little bit about the history of the Southern California PGA. We have past presidents, Bob Lovejoy, Tom Addis, who's of course, our executive director for 17 years, Bill Holbert, and we might see Tom Sargent jump in here in a little while. But just to talk a little bit about the amazing book that Bryce is putting together, we've got the outline for it. TA, can you highlight a little bit of what that's been like putting that book together, and what kind of memories it's brought back to the fold, and what you want to start off this morning's Catalyst with?
Yeah, it's been kind of fun, John. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's much the same outline as the book that Bill is completely involved with, and one of the originators from the California Teaching and Coaching Summit. So we took the idea from the format of that book and have added that format to what we're calling the Centennial book, of course. And it's really going to have an outline of some of the history of the Southern California PGA. As most of you know, we started in 1924 with 25 what we're calling charter clubs. There are now 19 of those 25 still in existence, and we've scheduled we've scheduled our events at most of the charter clubs this year, which has been kind of fun. But the book will cover the history of the section, and then of course we'll go through the leadership, whether it be the past presidents of the Southern California PGA, the executive directors, which we honored at our summer meeting in June at San Diego Country Club, which was kind of fun to see that group together for the first time in close to 50 years, actually 40 some years, that group was completely together. And like I said, that was great fun. It's going to highlight our section championship winners, our players of the year, those kinds of activities as well. And of course, highlight those 25 charter clubs, which if you've seen this past year, we've done a bi-weekly or a monthly highlight of the charter clubs throughout the year, and that Danny Cross and Bryce Seaver have been doing to showcase those clubs and a little bit of their history. So that's been kind of fun to do that as well. We'll highlight, John, some of our members from the past and their contributions. Members like Howard Smith, for example, who was one of the great leaders of our section. Of course, Pat Riley. Members who you may not recognize, like Dick Geckner, and those individuals. Mr. Geckner was almost solely responsible for helping the PGA, along with Mr. Smith, the apprentice, what was then the apprentice program, for example. So things like that we'll tell that story, and that'll be kind of fun, we believe, for everybody to read as well. So, and then of course the involvement of the section in the activities that the section is known for, whether it be tournaments on a national basis. With Michael Block, his history as an example of that nationally. So it'll be fun.
And in terms of the, just looking at the outline for the book in that first section, the history of the SCPGA, in terms of the history of, there's really three big components, like physical components of the Southern California PGA over the last 100 years that were tangible. First of which was our office location, the second of which was the PGA show or the expo, and then the third of which was the decision to build the SCPGA Golf Club in Beaumont. To kind of start with the offices, we were originally in North Hollywood. Now, TA or Bill, would you know the answer to this question? Was the North Hollywood location, how soon after 1924 was the North Hollywood location established?
Bill, you want me to handle that?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I have no idea.
On the charter, it indicates that that we were in an office in downtown Los Angeles. We don't know how many years. We think somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 years in that office on Flower Street. After that, we don't have an indication until the late 50s as far as where an office was located. And so we're taking it at that. We moved in with the SCGA according to their records in 1959 when they opened the office, and were there until 1987, and when we moved to
Anaheim?
Anaheim, and we're in Anaheim for a couple years prior to moving to Brea, and then in a couple different locations in Anaheim, and then after Brea is when we opened the golf club and moved our offices out to the golf club with the intention of building a permanent structure out there. We never did, and we were in the mobile home type office trailers, if you will, out in Beaumont for about 11 years, and then in 2012 moved to our current location in Ontario.
Now, Andy Tooney is joining us. He's a past president, and Andy, your presidency was in the 80s. At that time, we were in Anaheim or Brea?
We were in either one. When I first became president, we were still in a red brick building with the SCGA. And sorry for joining late, folks. I had a little problem with the link. And then we moved to, excuse me, an office in Anaheim. And Ron O'Connor was yeah. What did we call him back then? Not a chief executive officer.
We called him executive administrator.
Okay. And
Bob probably remembers that as well.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so that we moved to Anaheim in an office building there, and we're there for about, I think, a year and a half, and then we were jumping around for a while. We were trying to find a home, and it took us a while.
What made us want to, does anybody know what made us want to find a different location than the SCGA? Why the need to have two addresses? It seemed like so much there was a synergistic relationship more so then than now, just because, you know, from an infrastructure standpoint, neither association was as in depth as it is now. So why the need to split apart back then?
I'll start.
Yeah.
The office also included at the time, the SCGA office, along with us, included the Public Links Association, and then towards the end of our tenancy, the Southern California Women's Golf Association. So it became a matter of size, and we moved into from there, if I recall. The building was the space was about 5,000 feet, which then we could handle our program. Back then we did oral examinations and the whole thing in person. So we needed a little bit more space, and that was the primary reason for moving.
And the next piece of this, then we moved, when I became a member in '99, we were in Brea. And I remember Patrick Casey was doing new member orientations at that point out of that Brea location. And I don't think or perhaps the golf course was, when was the decision made to purchase the land and build the golf course? 98?
I was president 98, 99, and that's when the whole process started. And we didn't purchase the land. The land was a gift, so to speak. So the landmark, or the Oak Valley Partner guys, the landmark guys basically were going to donate the land to us if we would go ahead and build a 36-hole golf course and eventually a clubhouse. So what was a free gift of land turned out to be not so free. If nothing else, the road into the facility cost us $1 million alone. And then
Landmark had owned that land with
and the architects, Lee Schmidt, Brian Curley, they had routed everything, so everything was in place for us to just go ahead, with construction, which is, after a lot of due diligence, we signed all the papers and began construction. And we saw potential out there for growth and for with all the housing that the Oak Valley Partners actually were doing, that there would be some built-in golfers out there, which turned out not necessarily to be true. And we went into a little bit of a recession shortly thereafter. And as Tom mentioned, we were in those trailers, including the pro shop, such that it was, and doing okay with little overhead. But then, because of the contract, within 5 years, we were required to build a clubhouse of a certain stature and level that ended up costing us $5 million. So it was that debt that, once the golf course really didn't perform as we had hoped, got us into financial trouble and eventually led to us selling the golf course.
So who were we obligated to build a clubhouse for? Who are we contracted with to do that?
With Oak Valley Partners, the group that basically gave us the land with conditions to go ahead and build a golf course.
And what would be, just to kind of make it simple, stupid here for all of us, and me especially, what would be their incentive for giving us that land? Why would they do that?
Because it enhanced the value of the property that they owned all around it. And it took away them having to build the golf course at their expense.
Because there were no homes out in that community at that time, correct?
They were just getting started, if I recall.
And I think, didn't that lead to some of the problems that we ended up having financially were the result of a slowdown in the housing market? And we were depending on the housing for increased play, and the developers had to hope that they would sell more homes, but it didn't happen.
Right.
And we didn't have the play, and that's one of the reasons. It might have worked had the housing market been running along at a fast pace, but it slowed down, and so we were left holding the bag, if you might put it that way.
Well, it would have worked if we hadn't had the debt on the clubhouse. Yeah. If we'd been able to stay in the trailers for, pick a number, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, I think we'd still own the golf courses.
Go back a couple of years prior to that. We owned the West Coast show, and just very quickly, as we were able to sell that show and make a deal with the PGA of America, and that gave us the funds to build the golf course after a search for where we would go with properties and the like. And that investment turned into actually where we are now with our office building. But as Bill mentioned, we went into debt with the clubhouse after building the golf course, and the golf course. A couple things, in my opinion, with the golf course. The location, because of the housing, we thought it'd be good, but back then in the early 2000s, Beaumont was a pass-through area. The population itself was only about 9,000 people. When I moved there in 06, it was about 14,000 people. Now it's close to 51,000 people in Beaumont, just as an example. Just in Beaumont, not including Banning. But the weather was another factor that we really, in my opinion, didn't count on out there in Beaumont, whether it be the wind, whether it be the cold. And that really affected our opportunity to bring people in as well and bring golfers in. And then the golf course was extremely difficult. And that prohibited, again, this is my opinion and what I observed, prohibited a lot of regular golf, so to speak, whether it was men or women or seniors, whatever it might be. It's just too difficult. So all of those things kind of together is really what made the effort difficult.
Yeah, I
With
remember.
so many PGA pros involved in this endeavor, I'm surprised there wasn't more of a stress to Schmidt and Curley to keep the higher handicapper or the more novice golfer in mind when it comes to driving the rounds in terms of how they laid out the golf course.
Well, I mean, the layout of the golf course was already done, and I don't know if the word is correct, that we trusted the routing. I remember doing a construction tour with the architects and a few other people, and I commented that, and this was before they put sand in the bunkers, that boy, some of these bunkers look really, really severe, and they assured me that, well, no, when we put sand in, it won't be, but it ended up that the bunkering out there was very severe. To Tom's point, it was a hard golf course, but I mean, it was we've all been there. It has a nice look to it. The routing is okay, but it is a hard golf course. But to Tom's point, the housing and even people that were moving out there, the percentage that actually played golf wasn't what we had anticipated in our due diligence ahead of time. So it was a struggle from the get-go.
Were we obligated to build 36 holes?
Yes.
Just a more of a maximization of the land. Why not just 18?
Because there were homes around those entire 36 holes. That doesn't even mention all the environmental issues that we ran into with some gnat catch or some birds and some other things where we had to do some rerouting of some certain holes. And then once they went in and started building homes in that same area, it's like, well, we don't give a damn about that. We're just going to build. So it's, some of the things and some of the expense that we had to deal with was basically completely ignored once home construction began.
When we sold the golf course in late 2007, we sold it for $16 million and we owed $8 million. And we paid off that debt, but then that $8 million transformed into investments that allowed us then to acquire the building that we're in. We paid cash for the building, and we paid cash for the tenant improvements within the building. So when you look back and to current times, it turned out to be a benefit in that regard. All going back to the establishment of the show in 1980, and then selling the show to the PGA in the 90s, that allowed us to get where we are today, basically. And it's been an interesting trip, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's very fair to say, Tom, I think you'd agree that we got very fortunate to find the buyer that we did at the time that we did.
In 2007, yes.
Yeah, right before 2009.
Yeah, Mr. Lee and Mr. Lee acquired the golf course and he struggled and finally sold it in 10, I think it was 10, to Morongo. And Morongo has owned it ever since.
So when we sold it to Mr. Lee, it was going to remain the home of the Southern California PGA, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And we had our office still, and it was the home of the Southern California PGA until a couple of years ago. So yes, that's correct.
In name only, but even with the increased people in Beaumont, and the fact that Morongo owns it, and obviously Morongo has tons of money, they haven't really, in my opinion, made much of a success out of it. Conditions are still an issue out there. Rounds are still an issue out there. Location's still an issue out there. Weather's still an issue out there. But in terms of the fortunate timing of being able to find that buyer in 2007, and then the decision 2 or 3 years after that to take the bank rolled 8 million and buy the building in Ontario?
Yes. We took the proceeds from our investment and were able to pay cash for this building. We paid just over 1.1 million for this building, which at the time was really a good price, and then added the tenant improvements and moved in at the end December of 12. So we're heading on to 12 years being in this building, which has been very, very nice.
You think
How's the value of the building increased over that period of time? We talked about the money issue and how we ended up in a pretty good position, but also the building has increased the value to the membership in its own way.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what it is on the books right now, but on a resale value, the last time we asked one of the real estate brokers around here, it was about 2.7 that we could sell it for. So anywhere from there to $3 million right now is the resale value, if you will, of this building.
So a good way to look at it would be to say we've increased our income, and in a way that is offsetting the cost that we'd be paying somebody else if we were just a tenant.
Correct.
so? We are the third largest section in the country when it comes to the PGA, 1,600 plus members. But a lot of our success is not really predicated on the fact that we have a large membership. It was the sale of that show and what we've done with those monies since then. And that's why we're in the position we're in now.
Yeah. Yes.
Can I tell a funny story in regards to the sale of the show?
Please do. I was hoping, Tom Sargent's told some funny stories over the years about that.
Well, this is probably that story. And some of you remember when, let's see, was Dick Smith going out of office. And so we had a meeting back in that neck of the woods. And so some of us had a chance to play Pine Valley. Have you guys heard this story? I'm sure you have, but I don't know if our listeners have. So there was 3 of us going to go back there and play Pine Valley. And so we rented this beautiful white limo to drive in there. And we pull up and there's Gary Shaw standing there at the front door to greet us. And Gary says, "Oh, SoCal, yeah, you sold the merchandise show to the national body, and you've got all this money, so you rented a limo." And Sarge looks at him straight in the eye and says, "Rented it? We bought it and flew it out here on your money." It was a great day, that's for sure.
Well, Sarge would also tell you that the PGA seriously undervalued the show, and when they threw out a number, Sarge said back, "Well, you need to add a few zeros to that to get to where we need to be."
Yeah.
No, he said, how many times do you want to write that check? I think was his.
How often you want to write that check?
Yeah.
So in terms of the charter clubs, it has been amazing this year to be able to have as many events at the charter clubs that we've had. We have the section championship coming up in September at Rancho Park and Hillcrest, those two being charter clubs, and couldn't be on 2 opposite sides of the spectrum. So we're looking forward to that later on next month. Mr. Lovejoy, thank you very much for joining us today. Can you talk a little bit about your time in the Southern California PGA and your journey and what it spelled for you?
Sure. That's something you think about as you go through life, is what your experience has been and why you ended up where you ended up. And
a breakfast sandwich?
You? Well, am I? Who's in?
No cheese on mine, Nikki. I thought that was Steve Monday at the time, but I guess that's Nikki on the SCPGA.
I'll be happy to deliver. My apologies.
We all log in as Bryce, and then it comes up as SCPGA. So Steve Nikki, myself, we all come on as the same moniker. So I thought it was Steve, but it turns out it was Nikki.
Well, as I was saying, we think about these things of our past and why we ended up where we ended up. And I was fortunate enough when I left the goal I had for one career and decided to get into the golf business, and had the good fortune of, after 6 months in the business, ending up at Wilshire Country Club. And Frank Morey was a wonderful man and a good person to work with and for. I have fond memories of that, particularly the relationships that are developed. And probably of my career, the most important thing to me and the most rewarding and satisfying has been the relationships I've had an opportunity to develop. And while at Wilshire, I had an opportunity to develop some, and then proceeded to Old Ranch Country Club, where I worked for 10 years prior to becoming the golf professional at Big Canyon Country Club. And I think that I was very fortunate. Sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's just coincidences happen and you end up where you end up. And that was my good fortune. I can tell you a funny story. As long as Andy had one, I'll tell you one that was interesting. When I was applying for the job at Big Canyon Country Club, one of the members at Big Canyon Country Club was also was a member at Old Ranch. And as a result, when I was being interviewed, he and some other members from Big Canyon Country Club wanted to play River Oaks Country Club in Houston, in the Houston area. And Dick Harmon was the golf professional at River Oaks, and he and I had known each other since he had worked at Lakeside for a while. And I called Dick and asked him, I explained to him, I'm applying for the job here. Would there be an opportunity for me to help some of these guys get on the golf course? And he said, sure, I'll do it. Under one condition. If they don't hire you, they don't get to play, because the timing was that I'd be going to work at the end of April and they were going there the first week of May. So if I didn't get the job, then they weren't going to get on River Oaks. And while that had nothing to do really with my getting the job, I like to think, and I'm sure it was the case, but Dick teed them off on a Saturday morning. I think there were 12 of them on a Saturday morning on the first tee at River Oaks at about 9 o'clock. And I'll never forget that. Dick was a wonderful guy, and he did a great thing for me. And the members were a little bit impressed with the fact that I could get him on River Oaks on a Saturday morning. And I did end up getting the job at Big Canyon and loved it all the time I was there. Still teach there on 3 or 4 or 5 times a week. So it's been a wonderful journey. And the relationships are the thing that made it the most important. There's some wonderful members at every club that we as golf professionals have an opportunity to work at. And I was fortunate enough to have 2 clubs that were wonderful places to work.
You said 10 years at Old Ranch, and then
Yes.
How many at Big Canyon?
24 years at Big Canyon.
And currently you hold the emeritus title there, I believe.
I'm an honorary member at the club. And Fred Couples is also, and for a completely different reason. He knows how to play the game.
I would reiterate what Bob just said. I mean, the relationships that you gain through being involved in the association are not only invaluable, but they're fun. I can tell you, having done the research for 5 of the founding clubs for our Centennial book, I had the pleasure of talking to several professionals that were at those 5 clubs that have since moved on, guys like Ed Oldfield and Jimmy Schaefer from LA, Mark Greenslit and Scott Flynn from Ojai Valley, and old Sam Randolph at La Cumbre, Jimmy Petrolia when he was at Montecito, and the Roos that were at Hacienda, and then finally at the Burnham Wood now, or before, Mike Goodcase was there now. It's so much fun to talk to fellow professionals. and gain from their experience what they went through at the club. It's just, I mean, those relationships are just fantastic. And I'm sure Hulbert and Addis have got similar situations. And John, I'm sure you're building those relationships as we speak.
I'm certainly trying to. It's interesting because we all make such a commitment to our clubs and you know, our employers, and on those properties, they're like little micro universes, you know, and it's so wonderful to fellowship with the association outside of our clubs, because you know, we're all doing the same things at different places, having the same experiences, you know, having the same interactions with the tough members, with the good members, with the friendly members. The stories are similar, even though the addresses of the clubs change, and it's refreshing to fellowship with guys and gals that are going through the same things that we are, and you really wouldn't get that interaction if you weren't fellowshipping in the association and giving back and being a part of.
Yeah, it's just like this group on this meeting this morning. Is you go back and I was section president 80, 81, and 82, and then Bob following that, and then Andy, and you have these, I mean, these are 40-year friendships, you know, going on 50-year friendship. But it's, when you think about that, that's extraordinary. And it's something, when you look back at our history of the presidents that we've had, and the honor to know many of them and work with many of them is pretty exceptional. You know, when you look at a person like Howard Smith, or as Bob mentioned, Frank Morey. Frank was president when I went on the board, I believe, and he's not on the call today, but Skip Whitted. You know, that's history, and it's not just section history, it's national history. And then you go into the 2000s, you look at an example, Patrick Casey and his role in deciding to sell the golf club, which, as we said earlier, has meant it's meant a lot to us from that point. So the relationships and knowing these individuals and these fine people is just exceptional. I think that's a huge thing.
Talking about Patrick's perseverance with the sale, as a section and as a board of directors, was there much resistance to selling, or was everyone pretty much on board with this is the right thing to do and this is the right time to do it?
Well, at that time, it was the right thing to do. We were struggling. We had very little in the bank. We actually borrowed money from the PGA of America. I guess I can say that, to keep us going. So we owed the PGA of America money.
You mean above and beyond the ADP money?
Yeah. Yeah. We actually through Gary Shaw, if I recall, helped us. Gary did some counseling for us. Bill, you probably remember that back then. And then we ended up with a loan with the PGA. And of course, when we sold the golf course, we were able to pay all of that back, fortunately, and where we are today.
I would imagine that's a pretty uncommon practice. There's not sections all over the country that are borrowing money from National on a regular basis. I'm wondering how hard that was for Mr. Shaw to get that approved or to get that expedited.
Well, the PGA at the time that I recall didn't want to see a section fail, or a section investment fail, and that went a long way, and that's what Gary pushed to the PGA of America at that time, and the PGA felt the same.
So over the years of our 100-year Centennial, we have had five past presidents, 5 past national presidents that have been part of our section, starting with Joe Novak, and then on to Pat Riley. We all know, of course, TA, yourself, Paul Levy, and Jim Richardson in recent years. That being said, the appetite for national involvement, can you talk a little bit about your journey on that path, TA?
Sure, I feel like, I hope I'm not taking too much time in this deal, but I was an officer in the San Diego PGA and then on the section in 80, 81, 82, as I mentioned. And then I went on the national board in 86. My orientation year was 85. And I also went on the PGA of America Rules Committee and used to teach in what was then called PGA Business Schools. I taught in the PGA Business Schools from 1974 through 1991, which was wonderful. I really enjoyed that part of it. You get to meet so many people, and it was really a rewarding experience. And of course, the Rules Committee, the same thing. Was encouraged and decided to run for office in 1988, finishing my board of directors experience. I ran against Gary Shaw, lost to Gary. We had a 4-ballot election. And the amazing thing about that, it was 2 people and it tied. So we had to have the runoff 4 times, which was amazing. And the vote changed every time. Andy was back there at that point, and I think Bob was as well. And it was pretty amazing to sit there, and the delegates behind me said, "Hey, I voted for you." And I turned around after the next ballot. No, sorry, we voted for Gary. You know, it was amazing to sit through that. And then finally on the last ballot, because it was tied, I believe, at 56-56. And then the last ballot, we took a break. Gary got up, did a couple wise things, put brochures on everybody's table and that kind of stuff, and which was a good move at the time. And he ended up winning 58-54. And Gary's one of my best friends. And then I ran again in 90 with Ken Lindsay and won the election in 90. And then moved on from there. So it was quite a process. The loss was one of the worst experiences that I've ever been through. But yet it was one of the most rewarding things because it gave me a new viewpoint on the PGA, on myself. I had great support at Singing Hills. I was there for 31 years and great support from the section. Andy was instrumental in my first campaign, and then Tom Sargent in the second campaign. So it was, and I say campaign, that's what it is, John. I mean, it's hard. And counting votes and meeting everybody, and it's a difficult process. But it was certainly worth it, and the greatest experience of my life, other than being married to Susan, of course. But yeah, it was great.
And it was in New Orleans in '88 too.
It was in New Orleans. Yep. Yeah. One of my favorite cities.
Are you being sarcastic?
No. I
No.
love the world. Virgin Hurricanes.
Hey, John.
Yes, sir.
I think some of this is a testament to the leadership that comes out of Southern California. I had the privilege of being involved in 3 campaigns, as Tom called them. The first was Perry Dickey. We ran Perry, and he unfortunately was not elected. But then I was on Paul Levy's campaign and actually did his nomination speech when he won. And I was also on Jim Richardson's campaign and did his nomination speech when he won. Now, both of those, ended up in our section. Paul came from Texas and Jim came from all over the place, but now resides, obviously, as we know, at LACC. But I think, I'm sorry, at Rivy. Yeah. I think it just leads to, our section has always done a really good job of continually recruiting and training leadership. And I think it's I started way back when as a chapter board member who was assigned to be the district or to be the chapter rep on the section board when I really had no governance experience, and ended up becoming, section president in 98, 99. And I think there's a lot of that to where we take it very seriously as far as the leaders continuing to recruit and train future leaders. And I think that happens with us on a national level as well. And we certainly have the reputation that when we run a candidate, that candidate is taken very seriously, and we have the networking, and as Tom said and Andy said, the relationships to make that happen. And so we're very fortunate in that regard. But I think it's because of the culture that we have here in Southern California.
And you look back, John, on the presidents of the Southern California PGA, starting with Jack Malley, and there are individuals there that Willie Hunter, for example, Joe Novak at Bel Air, and being national president, Olin Dutra, who won, I don't recall how many times on the tour, and major champion George Lake, who contributed. At Rec Park, I believe they hosted 30-some consecutive section championships. And you go through it. Howard Smith, we mentioned before, Pat Riley, these are icons in the PGA of America, who were Southern California, and Southern California all the way. And we're fortunate. We've kept, from 1931 to today, we have all of the PGA magazines. And to look back in those magazines, which Bill looked through some, and I think Andy did as well, it's pretty extraordinary when you go back through the section notes, or you see pictures of annual meetings, and see pictures of Mr. Dutra and Mr. Novak and Howard Smith, all the way through there. And it's those magazines are here in the office, and I would encourage anybody to come and go through those and see the history of the section in that regard, and the role that we played. It was pretty cool.
Little piece of trivia. We only have 2 section members that were the recipients of the National Golf Professional of the Year, you, TA, being one of them, and Tom Sargent being the other.
Mm-hmm.
Question about the 5 past national presidents from the SoCal section. Were those individuals, Pat Riley, Joe Novak, yourself, TA, Paul Lieben, Jim Richardson, they served as district directors prior to national service?
Jim did. Jim was on the board when I was on the board.
Yeah, Jim, yes, other than Paul Levy.
Paul Levy was never a district director.
Correct. He was, if I recall, he was board of control, but did not serve as a district director that I recall.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But TA, you were a district director for?
I was 86 through 88. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, as we approach the end of the hour, anything you'd like to share with the audience before we conclude regarding our Centennial here in the SCPGA?
Yes, I would encourage those that are watching, if you're not already involved in governance or committees or the Southern Cal PGA at some level, even though if you think you don't have the time, get involved. It's just a testament, as those of us here will say, that the relationships that you create, the knowledge that you gain, the satisfaction that you have in giving back, it's certainly worth it. And it's been the highlight of my career to be so involved with the Southern Cal PGA, and I strongly urge you to get involved in some manner or form. And whether it leads to you becoming section president, which is like having an additional job, as John will find out in a couple of years, to the one you already have, it's like having 2 jobs at once. Particularly as the section has grown and things have gotten more complicated, but you've got a tremendous support staff, obviously, to help you with that. But it's just so gratifying, and the people that you get to meet and the relationships that you form are well worth it, let alone what it can do to you as a golf professional.
Amen to that.
Thank you, Bill.
Well said.
Okay, gentlemen, on behalf.
Wait, John.
Oh yeah, go ahead, TA.
Yeah, I'd like to. Sorry, I talked too much as it is, but
Oh,
just
I appreciate it.
real fast. I think we really do have the finest section in the PGA of America with our leadership, with our executive director Nikki Gatch, and our entire staff, and the programs that we do and that we're able to do. We have the opportunity to do because we have such great leadership, and I would encourage you all to talk with the leaders. Talk with the past presidents, learn a little bit more. We're at most meetings. Sit down with Bob or sit down with Andy or Bill or myself. Sit down with an officer, John, and just talk about the PGA and talk about the history and learn a little bit about what we're doing. I think that's an opportunity that's there for you. And as Bill mentioned, to become involved in leadership, this gives you a little bit of insight. Every meeting I had the opportunity when I was, whether it's on the board, the PGA board, the section board, and even a PGA officer, was to sit down with PGA leadership, whether it was the CEO or whether it was the president, and just ask questions, and learn and learn a little bit about the PGA of America, which is a great organization. The history, our history with the tour, for example, that a lot of people don't know about. Our executive directors, you met our former executive directors in June, but a lot of people didn't know that Ron O'Connor was our executive director for a period of time. So I think there's stuff like that would be fun to talk about, and I just encourage everybody to try to do that and have a conversation as often as you can with your leadership and fellow member.
Thank you, TA. On behalf of the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA, we want to thank Bill Holbert, Bob Lovejoy, Andy Tooney, and Tom Addis for joining us this morning on the Catalyst webinar. Your insight is and your experience is a treasure, and every opportunity we have to learn about it and for you to share with us, we're grateful for that. Thank you, gentlemen. For all the SCPGA members that are on this morning's Catalyst, you will receive 1 PDR credit for joining us. We had a huge crowd today, 71 in attendance, and a lot of names we don't normally see on here. Thank you very much for supporting. TA always draws a crowd. He always draws a big crowd. So thank you, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all.
See you before section championship at Hillcrest and Rancho Park. We'll see you then.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.